Good afternoon. My name is Vincent Amani. I'll be talking about developing strategy for zero-day exploitation. Um, the agenda that I'll actually follow up today um, will start with the introduction of the concept, the basic triggers when we talk about exploitation, um, understand and align enterprise moving parts. I'll also talk about enterprise posture to monitor assets, how to stay abreast with attack evolution, and at the same time, we'll come to the conclusion, and afterwards, there will be a question and answer time. But concurrently, while actually taking on while actually giving out the presentation, if there is any question, please feel free to put it on the question section and I will answer it momentarily as we go. Most especially if I'm in between a particular subject area that needs further explanation or dive into that concept, I will by all means dive into it and explain it better. Now, without further ado, um, when you hear about zero-day exploitation, what comes into your mind? Um, it means a lot to different people, but the basic concept of C to zero day exploitation is it occurs when a hacker exploits a vulnerability of a software developer can fix it. Um, each time a developer actually develops a software, definitely there are various tools that either from compliance tools or policy tools or how the coding is actually structured based on simple business logic of how it's supposed to operate. Any gap from that area will amount to a vulnerability because um, from most of all this vulnerability, definitely it can be fixed. But do some developers actually care to actually make sure it's fixed the first round, or should they just allow it to come with a different set of patches? These are open-ended question. Um, the utilization of vulnerability exploit the software translate to zero-day attack. Um, it's important for us to realize if it has not happened does not mean it won't happen. It will happen, but when? That is the caveat here. When will it happen? And how prepared are you? How prepared is your environment to make sure you counter any form of mishap that result into this particular issue? Now, when you hear about there are triggers that goes with most of all this attack. Um, these triggers ranges from uh, it could manifest, like I said, it could manifest from any form. It could be missing data encryption. Uh, it could be SQL injection. Sometimes comes in form of a cross site in a web app. It could be URL redirect. It could be broken algorithms, missing authorizations, and buffer overflow bugs. But I think the common one that resonates with the executives, that resonate with the middle managers, that resonate with the senior developers, and even some of the new developers or intermediate developers are the bugs. But can it be taken care of fully well? Yes, of course. So if all these triggers are managed in efficient manner, um, I think you can stay above the water level that will bring into this kind of attack. Managing it, it's not a day's job. Um, it has to be planned properly. And at the same time, it comes with the vision of actually synchronizing both the people side, the process side, and the technology side, which if you have to actually automate some repeated tasks, you want to actually have identifier to understand the pattern that one can actually, harvest from different scenarios that will result to these triggers. So that is very, very paramount and important. Now, naturally, this is a component that make up the software ecosystems. The developers, those are the programmers, the coders that actually develop the software. You have the resellers that actually sell the software. I'll call them the second branch of understanding the basic knowledge, but they're more or less like their retail channel. Um, Understanding the process of that business logic of that particular software. I think they don't have the 360 deep dive, but they have some element of the core functionalities they can talk about it to the end users, the customers. That is why they are resellers. We have the customers, which happens to be the final consumers and the users of this particular software application. Um, Anybody can be the users of this particular software application, can become the customers or clients. The consultants are the implementers in most cases. It comes in form of the flavor of either as a contractor or direct consultant that have the understanding how this particular product can be implemented or fitting to work within the organizational setup to achieve the goal. Um, Professional services happens to be implementers or another flavor of consultant that understand the software, that have the requisite knowledge of the software and being able to actually do the interpretation, implementation, the post-implementation review, and across the board. So the set of all the developers, the resellers, the customers, the consultant, the professional services make up the software ecosystem. With all these, the enabler of the ecosystem actually starts with the developers and terminates with the professional services. So it works in this particular evolution cycle. The movement in every organization you go to, there are moving parts. Those are dynamic, and there are those that are static part. But the moving part, they're more or less like the enabler of um, the revenue generation of every organization. And the moving part of any organization is a process, the people, data, visions, and partner. The process, these are interrelated uh, kind of set of activity that is aligned in a very, very condensed manner to execute the business function. Those are the process. The people happens to be the internal resource that actually utilize a process. The data happens to be the asset of the organization. That is what is actually being used. And the vision happens to be what the organization actually stood for. What makes them actually goes into the business. I call that the target mandate of the organization. That is the vision. And we have the partners. The partners could range from a consultant, could range from resellers, could range from um, clients. So the list of all these process, people, data, vision, and partners, they are meant to change. They change it every time. That is why they call it the moving part. It can be recalibrated based on any arrangement structured by the organizational leaders, This moving part can be structured in any way they want to structure it. And that is why it is called the moving parts. Now, one of the four critical fundamentals of dealing with the moving parts, you want to tie your counter strategy to the enterprise moving parts. One is establish a clear approach to deal with cascading risk if the organization is tight. When we talk about tight organization, is organization that any change or process that actually happen cascade to every moving part easily. It's not decoupled. It's not modular in nature. It becomes a problem. Now, it's always the best approach to risk is to look for a way to modularize your enterprise environment if your organization is large. Because if your organization is large and is tight, it's a recipe for disaster waiting to happen. Anytime there is an attack, definitely the ripple effect will, except there are the two solutions that can actually happen here. But the BCP, the business continuity planning aspect or component of it, will be missing in the show. Because why? You would want every part of your solution to be replicated and kept in the core site, which means the backup has to be real time. The backup can be per month. The backup can be weekly. The backup can be sequenced to a timing session of every 4 hours. You replicate a backup, mirror it, and move it to the core site, should in case. Then from there, if there is an issue, you can actually migrate it back once you are looking at BCP, business continuity planning. All those are part of, I will call it approach if your organization is large and is tight. So organizations that are large and that are tight, it's easy to implement a technology, a software solution, but it's very, very difficult to manage a disaster afterwards. The second point we have here is develop a simple mechanism to handle risks from the partner ecosystem. Establish a community in your organization to regularly capture common CVE, that's a common vulnerability exposure. And the member of the committee should be the cybersecurity team folks and the developers. In all this, no matter how good or robust your plan is, without an executive sponsor involvement, I'll call it an academic exercise. It won't pass the daylight. It will never have a good litmus test to get an assent or a budget to follow, because you need a top-down approach, and the top-down approach has to be an executive sponsor. That's where the involvement, the catch, the commitment, the resource, the involvement whereby time, energy, everything within the organization to pull every hand on deck to make sure this can actually work out and function well. The clear communication, establish a clear communication among the internal stakeholders is important. Enterprise posture. Now, it's very, very important. Without a common and a clear communication, what you're doing, you're actually establishing a silo. And a silo in the long run does not actually end up well when there is an attack. So it's important, establish a clear communication among internal stakeholders. Of some of those enterprise posture to monitor assets, you have a classification of assets, which is your data. Allocate resources to support mission critical application, which are that are tied to your core vision. Um, Establish a simple patch management program targeted to operational needs. Baseline and improve process, which means you can't improve on what you can't measure. When you establish a baseline, definitely you want to grow and optimize your environment fully, efficiently well. Automate and manage production environment log real time. There are countless tools here. And implement tools. I'll get to that very shortly. On the communication side, under the classification of the asset side, you want to classify your data. You want to define security parameters within your data based on sensitivity in terms of equipment actually being used and your IP address. If you're operating from areas where a lot of IP address actually blacklisted, there's a red flag. The sensitivity, I think this is where the classification comes into play. You can't even assess certain assets of the organization, regardless how placed you are, if you're in a certain area. And most of all these actually is, I will call it, is based on some of the sensitivity attributes that exhibit in intelligent API call. Now, you want to allocate resources to support mission critical application. You want to assign a dedicated team of developers to work with cybersecurity team. It's important. Um, Without a dedicated cybersecurity team, there's no way you can actually get your messaging across. There's no way you can attend to a critical incident real time and make sure they're treated when as that before it becomes a problem. Um, when it's an incident, it can be treated real time before it becomes a problem. It becomes a problem and it's not resolved. I think after some time, it becomes a major issue to look at. Establish a simple patch management program targeted towards operational needs. You want to enable regular update across teams and cybersecurity teams. Um, Now, a bridge in communication for effective patch management helps the developer improve in their coding and at the same time also help the cybersecurity understand patterns that would definitely create a vulnerability that will become an issue. Uh, if it's not an issue today, it could become an issue tomorrow. Those are very, very critical. They're key to actually factoring in. Uh, the consideration like this actually help you have a good stand-up team that will not react, but will proactively, establish an ironclad environment for a solution any time. Now, it's always good to actually baseline uh, a typical a software development team. Um, you want a situation whereby you baseline. Do they have a library for CVE, common vulnerability exposure? How is there a lessons learned for the last CVE treated? This is where a baseline to improve on the process actually exists. Is important. These are logs that are timeless in nature. When I say timeless, um, resources, people come and go in organization, but even though when you go, there is a log there. In this library, most of all this information acts as an artifact sitting in the library. It helps both teams to actually improve on their patch management program. If they can actually establish a common library to actually capture CVE, when a CVE actually shows up, how to react to the CVE, and at the same time, what did they learn that actually kept them ahead of their game for the next type of attack? It's very, very important, most especially in an environment that is clustered with a lot of integration. Fully well, when there is a CVE with one application, it tends to actually have an effect on the other application will not function optimally. So how do you isolate that application from integration standpoint? So stuff like this will actually keep the thing going. They're fired up for the next process of improving. When there is an attack, this is how there is a formula of actually using the kill approach to kill, isolate the system. If it's to take it from the network, it's taken out of the network. Um, it all depends. If it's a SaaS application, how do we actually, I mean, take the network out of the SaaS? So all these are part of these need to be actually a baseline because you can't measure anything, you can't improve on anything you don't measure. So you establish a baseline, attach, define a KPI, key performance indicator. What worked well the last time? What didn't work well this time? Establish some kind of a governance team. I will call it a steering team, a cybersecurity team. There will be a pointer as to how the playbook goes. So that is why a playbook is not a steady, it's not a steady, I'll call it a fixed approach to dealing with issue. It's dynamic in nature. Now, implement tools. We have different type of tools. We have the SASks, that is static. We have the software composition tools. We have the dynamic, and we have the IAST, which happens to be the interactive. IAST tools actually function with code or software that in transit. Um, Code or software that are actually in transit actually utilize IAS tools. There are countless of them. Um, IAS tool most of the time don't do the job of a start tool, but actually do a little bit of the job of the DAS tools. That's the dynamic control tools. Um, you will want to actually harmonize your environment such that you implement tools that will definitely capture a good, you might not get 100% of what you want, but you want a tool that will actually harmonize your environment fully well. From one, you can actually capture the abstraction of one report system, a clear dashboard of what is actually happening at every interface. Fully well with a tool like this, if implemented, enable fully well, it also help the developers to actually learn. Um, no man is an island, like that's a usual saying. For most of all these tools, if there is a repeated pattern, some kind of any abnormalities within the entire code, definitely it will help the developers team to actually improve and at the same time being able to structure most of their codes even before it gets to the point of testing. So as it's running, most of all this are actually embedded in the program. And if it's embedded in the program, which means real time, it can be flagged off and also help them to improve on their pattern of most of all this coding. Because in a typical software development lifecycle, you want to gate phase different type of, you don't wait until the end to actually test. You want to actually make sure before you get to certain gate phase, boom, there's always a test. Keep going, keep going. That is why it's continuous integration. It's very, very important. Um, from experience over the years, I've discovered that organization especially that actually deem to automate and manage production environment logs real time actually allow the security folks or the security engineers to actually put attention to something else and allow them to actually go back and review the logs and see the abnormalities. Even when application is actually pushed into production, you want to see the behavioral pattern over time. So it's very, very important to actually have an automated tools. An automated tools will push a whole lot of activity in, and at the same time be sorry about that, and at the same time being able to help overall in addressing a lot of issues head on, while um, allowing the security engineers or the software engineers to actually concentrate on other scope of vulnerability. There are a lot of countless tools that are in the market. It's just for you to actually identify the tools that fit into your stack system, your environment. You bring in the tools. It has to work. If it works, you see the flag of not false alarm, because I know most of these tools actually give false alarm. So it takes experience of somebody that is a very good security engineer to actually review this particular um, uh, log abnormalities and being able to just call it out, analyze it, and say, oh no, this is a false alarm. This is a false alarm. And those are productivity time that one has to be very, very careful about consideration. So most of the time, you don't want just a new security analyst or a new engineer that haven't got into the raft of how most of all this application works to come do the analysis. You want somebody that's advanced developers to just come take a look at it, probably start mentoring a younger engineer over time, because a repeated pattern will give you very thorough lessons learned and how to approach it in a more better or refined way going forward. So it's very important to understand how the app behave. And this is where the automation definitely capture it, or this log, the capture the log of the behavioral pattern. Now, it's always very, very important, even though you can't eliminate the attack, but you can wave them off and being able to stay abreast, understand the pattern of how they come into play, and how you can improve your overall SDLCs or your overall system landscape, your overall application environment of your organization. Design a good preventive mechanism program involving the right tool and stakeholders. Some of those tools is always good for the executive to actually champion a very good memo to say, what, there is a need for us to actually start this program to make sure we wait off. But you need the experience of the senior advanced developers to actually give you an understanding that having this research, this type of tools, make it, a business case analysis, identify which one fits to your environment. Not all tools actually fit to your environment. Some tools can actually give you a good coverage. It all depends on how some of the, I will call it, some of the requests on the type of coverage you want. Not all of them actually have a good coverage. Should in case defense is flawed with vulnerability, then limit access through controls. Establish a good control mechanism in place. If you establish a good control mechanism, there won't be a cascading risks issue. And two, you know fully well you put a layered approach to your security system in your environment. Identify a way of actually isolating certain system. Take, for example, um, a a professional that is actually working in your organization, either a contractor or an employee working remotely, knowing fully well can be easy access your system through VPN, access your environment through VPN while working. Any download that actually come in there, take for example any form of malware that is intended to actually corrupt uh, any of your system, your environment. The first and foremost is actually to isolate. It's through VPN. The security actually have to make a quick call. They'll isolate the system. Um, because most of those malware they actually come into stay. So you isolate the system completely When you isolate the system, you keep your entire enterprise environment safe. Um, those are the kind of isolation I was actually referring to some few minutes ago. You enable auto backup. It's very, very important. Have a cold site and a warm site, and being able to actually replicate and auto mirror your environment real time to a different cold site host environment. Should in case there is an attack, fully well, nothing is actually lost. Um, Deploy network intrusion system to monitor unusual activity. This is where patterns. There are a lot of countless network intrusion system. You put it a different in between your servers. If you're on the on-prem environment, you can put it between different node point in your clustered environment. You can just put most of all those intrusion system up there, and definitely it will help you monitor abnormalities within your environment. Implement antivirus solution. Having a very good antivirus solution is very important. Uh, it's very, very important. It will actually enable, to some extent, being able to actually zip up your firewall properly. There are certain sites you can actually go. You'll be denied each time you actually want to enter certain website. Certain website that will have the ability to corrupt your entire environment. It will just block you. So that is what actually happened in this scenario. Um, Now, overall, we've been walking through the concept of zero-day exploitation. Now, the sophistication of bad actors is becoming complex. You can only know the mind. That is why the mind of a good actor, if they demonstrate it, but a bad actor is in their mind, is in their head. You're not in their mind, you're not in their head. That is to tell you they're becoming more complicated, they're becoming more complex to actually deal with because they understand. Sometimes they actually put a simulation just to mimic your environment, and they're able to actually extract some behavioral pattern of your software solution, and they could come with a very good attack to hit your system. So, but can be tamed, even though the environment is very complex with bad actor. But the good news is that it can be tamed through outsourcing to a managed service provider. Um, I know to some organizations, especially that are distributed across different regions of the world, you want to actually outsource your security. Sign an agreement. You have to tie a part of your disaster recovery, part of your BCP, part of your attack will be definitely tied to a good liability. That is, it will keep the MSS, the service security service provider, is outsourced to keep them up. That is their mission. They will do the job very well. But if you co-locate it in-house to be managed, um, I see it most of the time becoming very critical that the same IT or security, the same IT department or security would definitely start outsourcing some component. This is where the issue of shared vision, shared responsibility between what was outsourced will be very, very difficult to manage. But when you outsource a certain defined scope for all the security, I think it becomes easy for the organization to stay awake. Um, all they do, they measure everything based on, I will call it performance and contractual obligation. Classify your data asset. Not all your data assets are the same. Not all your data assets are the same. So it's always good to classify your data assets, just like how most different applications come in to have a different abstraction from your environment is different. The API calls, they're different. So classify your data asset. It's key, it's important. Support the executive management is needed to remain active. Huh. The support of the executive management is needed to remain active. Without the support of the executive management, everything we've talked about today is only an academic exercise. It's only a strategy that is passive, is not active, which means it's not being enabled. Who are to enable it? The executive management. Money is involved, commitment is involved. Establish a community for developers and cybersecurity team. Um, the developers and cybersecurity team need to be best of friends. A community of developers, all you just need to do, create one library where they share knowledge, share a common lessons learned, and that day the current tools in the market, better tools, they will have a lot to share and a lot to how to actually improve on the entire overall solution. So it's key, it's very important, and it's critical. Establish a community that will bring in the cybersecurity team and the developers together. It will go a whole long way to make an effective um, zero-day exploitation very, very wonderful. Now, automate your patching program. Uh, Most organizations that have a manual patching program tend to come out most of the time with a lot of deficiency, most of the time with a lot of issues that takes a longer time to resolve. But automating your patch management program will go a long way to clean out all the sanity in the organization. That way, most of a process have a clean pass. Um, all level of activities channeled towards decision, analyze, but at the end of the day, most of the repeated tasks has actually been automated on the patch management program, which is key. Automate vulnerability management is important. This is where we talk about the different tooling concepts. Depending on how you actually put each of these tools in different gate phase value, definitely they will be able to manage most of your solution. Establish a monitoring team. Regardless of if you outsource the service component, the security as a service to a different contractor or solution provider to manage it for you, you still need a prime with some two or three, depending on how large the organization. You still need a prime that'll be looking at this report, being able to actually escalate it to senior management or executive. When it comes to issue of budget, when it comes to issue of expediency to deal with things, definitely you need a prime. This is where they establish a security monitoring team. They're monitoring all the tools, they monitor all the upgrades, they monitor all the some kind of procedure enforcement. It's important and key here. Require regular training across the organization to improve internal posture management. Um, I would say most organizations are already doing that, but they're not doing it enough. It's just when the security assessment is actually a risk assessment, a security, when one is actually given a job in an organization, you want to do the reference check. After a reference check, a criminal background check actually is the first phase of most of those post-job management program. But a lot of people actually don't get that concept. I remember a time I was having a conversation with an executive. Say they don't have anything like that. I say you have a program, but you need to actually enhance the program. Not just when a criminal record check is checked on the employees as they come in or contractors as they come in, but there should be an enhanced training that will keep going internally, how to keep the entire employee with good posture management. That way, when there is an issue, they will be able to actually react in a proactive manner and being able to actually lock down every risk and kill it real time. um, Implement intelligent threat detection tools. Not all tools are the same. Uh, some tools come with a better efficiency to calibrate good metrics. Some don't actually give you a good metrics and a dashboard. Um, it's very, very important and key. Uh, the community I talked about earlier on, which happens to be the combination of both the developers and the cybersecurity team, will be charged with the security team prime here, that's the team monitoring team prime here, to just identify, do some research on some tooling that will be relevant to today's critical exposure on different kind of triggers I talked about in my slide number 2. Establish a continuous threat posture management. The threat posture management comes in form of how the pattern of the last CVE, what happened, how was it addressed. Um, Lessons learned there can be transformed to a playbook that will be dealt with internally, create some kind of a customized to different unit, how they should react, um, when there is an attack. That way, you are creating an active posture management within your organization. That way, you are leaving zero time for them to react. You're making them more safety conscious, security conscious. When there is a cyber incident, they know what to do. Not just the component of the incident management, but the internal process that cascade around the entire organization. How to handle it, how to escalate, de-escalate, and how to effectively lock down the risk and kill it. Um, I think with all these that I've actually listed, it would definitely give an outstanding, I would call it, approach of a good strategy to handle zero-day exploitation. It's common now. There was an incident that just happened some few days back with a major vendor. The CVE was actually identified from a very big flaw that's after a major patches. So they just have to normally most patches actually there are minor patches and there are major patches. Minor patches, a software program becomes more matured after about one major patches, but that is how some organizations view it. But theoretically, I think after two minor patches, that software is actually stable in any production environment to function well. But managing the entire life cycle of that particular software is key, and vulnerability is paramount to how far you want to actually drive the maturity of that software application. That way, you're trying to actually keep everybody. I mean, everybody should be abreast, and you'll be able to manage all the attack evolution pattern. You'll be able to actually capture where each issue actually exists. You create a common library that will be shared between the community of developers in cybersecurity. That way, I think there's only one source of truth in dealing with attack. Um, if, for example, that community needs to be expanded to involve both network, they can bring in a network architect and the folks, the network specialists to actually come in there. If it goes beyond just, you can keep increasing. But at the end of the day, you're trying to create a very robust committee of practice for cybersecurity. That is the trend that will happen 2024 and beyond. Cybersecurity won't be taken as just a concept to manage your risks, enterprise risk management. It will be seen as a practice area that has come to live with us that we need to actually grow if we want to really manage our critical assets of organization. Um, thank you. If you have any question, just let me know. Um, if you don't have any question, You can reach me. My phone number, you can reach me clearly via my email number uh, through the organizers of this particular summit. I want to use this opportunity again to thank you. And I hope I was able to actually meet your expectation of the delivered content. Thank you. Bye bye for now.